We are in our final week of our series this month we've been walking through called The Way of the Wise, where we've been looking at the wisdom, the kingdom-shaped, the Jesus-oriented wisdom that God wants to invite us to walk with in the world. We've talked about the series, how oftentimes when we use the word wisdom, we immediately go to the idea of intelligence, IQ, knowing the right answers to the questions that we are faced with when we are facing a fork in the road moment. But I've challenged us to see wisdom as something deeper and broader than that, but something more challenging than just knowing the right answers. We've said it this way, that wisdom is not knowing everything. Wisdom is knowing how to walk through the world. It's about application. And this is one of the annoying things about God that's so true and so beautiful and so costly, is that he actually wants us to act on what we know. And how we walk is more important to the heart of the Father than what we know. And so it's not just about knowing everything, it's about knowing how to walk through the world and then taking steps in that direction. I mentioned throughout the series that I've been doing pastoral ministry in one form or another for almost 20 years. And oftentimes people come and want to meet with me and they want to get some counsel, some advice on a fork in the road decision that they need to make or a challenge that they have in front of them. And I've stumbled upon this grid, these 3 questions to ask them to consider before they make a decision that I think is so rooted in what wisdom is all about, and also rooted in what Jesus is all about and what he was all about. And we've said that these questions, they're upside down and they're counterintuitive, they're not natural, they're not popular for us to consider, but it's actually the way of God. And today, as we land the plane in this series, we're going to talk about the final question that I want you to consider when you're facing a fork in the road moment, and is this: am I making this decision out of fear, or am I motivated by love? Am I just scared to death and that's why I'm going down road A? Am I afraid of what I might lose and what people might think of me, or failure or setting myself back? Or am I motivated by love? I think this is a challenging but vital question for us to ask before we face any tough decision, before we face any mundane decision in your life as well. So let's talk about the big scary thing a little bit this morning. Let's talk about fear. Let's talk about how fear motivates us and how fear is so ingrained in our culture, in our world. I mean, most people, the things that people are afraid of, right? Public speaking, that's like on the list, right? You have air travel, illness, loved ones dying, things like that. But let me just tell you a little bit some of the things that I'm afraid of so you can laugh at me a little bit. When's the last time you've been in a group setting with a bunch of people you don't know? And you have that dreaded icebreaker moment when they say, hey, we're going to go around and share an interesting fact about yourself. And this is where Joel dies inside every single time. I don't know what to say. What's interesting? What's braggy? What's weird? Like, what do I even say in that moment? And so I thought we'd just spend some time. We'd all be sharing that. So we'll have an open mic and go around and do that. No, not at all. What are we afraid of? When's the last time you've been in a place where you had no Wi-Fi, but even worse, no cell service either? And you're like, what do I even do with my hands? You feel like Ricky Bobby in that moment, like, I don't even know what to do with my hands, like, because we feel like we're completely lost. What if so-and-so needs to get a hold of me? How do I even know where to go with no GPS? What do we actually do? Things that I'm afraid of sometimes, every now and again, I'll look up and I'm like, that car's been following me for quite a while. And I know it's probably someone who lives in my neighborhood. I know that. But I also know I'm now part of a Bourne Identity movie, basically. And so I'm going to pull down this weird alley. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to see if they stop it. I'm going to go. I get really, really freaked out thinking that someone's going to follow me. I got my own issues. I guess that's true. But here, maybe for me, the scariest thing that you could ever do to me, and I'm assuming that I'm going to get a bunch of these text messages after this morning, but nothing freaks me out more than looking down at my phone and I receive a text message that says this. Just kill me now, right? Like, we need to talk about what? Do I even want to ask? What if it's really heavy right there? Oh my gosh, now I'm not going to sleep. Here's the end of my week, right? This is just what I feel over and over and over again. Some of the things that I'm afraid of. Maybe you're a little like me as well. I don't know if you've considered this, but fear is a huge part of the way that you are being advertised to. The way that marketers and advertisers, they try to get you to do something by being afraid so you move into the right direction or you hold back. I mean, this started maybe with list Listerine and being afraid of having bad breath. And so you're like, oh, I can't do that. I must buy Listerine. But there's also the Michelin Tire Company back in the early 90s. They really dug into our fear, especially if you're a parent. And they put together this commercial that was aired over and over again in 1991. Check this out.
It's not how much you pay that counts, but what you get for your money. This consumer tip was brought to you by Michelin, because so much is riding on your tires.
Do you really love your baby? Then you'll buy Michelin, all right? Like, do you really want your baby to be safe? Like, come on. You want your kid to live, right? Buy Michelin. Like, it's like that fear that's underneath of the cuteness of the chubby baby in the tire right there. You know, fear is not only in advertising, fear is definitely a huge part of our politics in our cultural moment, right? And this is not a one-sided thing, but we have politicians from the left and right and everywhere in between stoking our fears, telling us that we need to vote for them or else. And just to prove my point that this is both sides, I'm going to put two quotes up that have been said over the last 10 years, and I'm not going to attribute them to who. And I don't want you to try to guess. I just want you to realize this is someone from the right, a Republican, and someone from the left, a Democrat. And this is what they said to stoke our fears in a political season. One politician said, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That's one side. Another side, nah, much better. This is somebody else who's running against them. I am the last thing standing between you and the apocalypse. I mean, come on. Here we are. And this was like, years ago, and we're still here. No apocalypse, I guess. Like, not the end of the world. But politicians, they play off of our fears, telling us that we have to do this or else. And I don't want to dog fear altogether, because fear has a useful role in our lives. And I'll put it this way. Like, I've discovered this, and I'm sure you have too, that fear is useful to stop behavior. As a parent, like, it is a really great tactic to get our kids to stop doing something, like as easy as don't touch the stove, or as simple as telling your kids a little fib like, buddy, you can't bring a backpack full of toys into the Pacer game because it's illegal and the cops are going to take your backpack from you. I don't think that's true, but it worked on getting our kids not bringing a backpack in, right? But fear is useful to stop behavior, but I don't know if you've ever considered this. Even though it's useful to stop behavior, fear is not effective at motivating new behavior. And this is not something I want to appeal to the scriptures to. I want to appeal to social sciences and what we have learned. Andrew Elliott, a social scientist who did lots of research on approach and avoidance motivation back in the mid-90s, discovered that there's a big difference between the two. Avoidance motivation is about moving away from a negative outcome, like don't fail, don't fall, don't get rejected, don't lose what you have, and it stops us from doing things. And avoidance, it doesn't speak the language of growth. There's a difference between avoidance, telling you don't do that, and approach motivation, telling you to move towards something like grow, create, serve, build something beautiful. Elliott's research discovered that fear is naturally better and more effective at producing avoidance than it is approach. Fear stops us from doing bad things, but it doesn't lead us into positive behavior. And you guys, this is just wired into the way that God created our bodies as well. So if you ever wanted to know what the brain looked like on Sunday morning, look at this. This is your brain at church, on church, I guess. But this is just like what we see in the way that God created our brain all together. Let me walk you through this. We've got different parts of our brain. The brain stem, which just really scientific. It does the breathing and stuff, just to go real deep there. We have the cerebellum that's used for our motor skills and our balance and walking. And then the rest of our brain is called the cerebrum. And inside the cerebrum, there are two interesting individual parts of our brain. We have the amygdala, which is the smallest part of the bottom of our cerebrum, which it's about fear and anger and excitement and impulse, not thinking, just reacting and responding. That's the amygdala. And then what takes up 60% of the mass of your brain is the prefrontal cortex, where deeper thinking goes. Empathy, considering things through somebody else's shoes, patience and waiting, delayed gratification, forgiveness and letting something go instead of holding someone's feet to the fire. This is the largest mass of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, but some brain scientists say that human beings go weeks, months without even engaging the prefrontal cortex. Less than 10% of all the things that you do even engages 60% of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. You know where most of those decisions and actions come from? the amygdala, where there's not deep reflective thought, there's just reaction. And that is where fearful decision making is found as well. And something that I find to be really fascinating is that when you have a fearful reaction where you move away from something, or you flinch, or you're angry about something, or you get really excited spontaneously, in the amygdala, your body gets a shot of endorphins. They get a shot of serotonin, these feel-good things and chemicals in your body. But when you use the 60% of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, for empathy and patience and forgiveness and reflection, you don't get any reward. I think the reality is that when we make these fearful decisions with our amygdala that we do all the time, we get these shots of emotion, these shots of chemicals that make us feel good. I think many of us are hooked on our fear. We're driven by our fear because we're being rewarded for these instinctual moments, and we don't get the reward for slowing down with empathy, patience, and forgiveness. And many of us are living our lives moment by moment, driven by our amygdala, which is just a small part of our brain, but we're hooked to it like we're hooked to a drug. And fear, you guys, I don't have to spend a lot of time telling you that fear robs us of so much good. When we're driven by our amygdala part of our brain and we're just hooked on the fear responses, it robs us of so much. Fear, anybody lost some sleep because they're up in the middle of the night thinking about things, fearful about things? It robs us of new opportunities that could possibly be there, new relationships with people, deeper relationships by actually going there in our relationships and having harder conversations. It robs us of our hopes and dreams. Often, I imagine that in a room this size, we could all think back to a moment in our life where we let fear be in the driver's seat, and it robbed us of what we thought our life was actually going to be like, and it'll never be the same because of it. But I also, this morning, I want to encourage us to lean in to consider that fear robs us of deeper things too. Fear robs us from deep, life-giving relationship with God. It robs us of a trust-filled, trust-anchored relationship with God, a sense of faith, not just as a list of rules and statements that you believe of doctrine, but it robs us of a sense of faith being an adventure of partnership with God. And your Heavenly Father wants more for you than just to live a life based off of fear. He wants you to consider living a life that is based on love instead. And so I want to go back to the question that we are asking you to consider in your decision making today. Am I making this decision just based off of fear and what I could lose? Or am I being motivated by love? That's the question today. Am I being motivated by fear, or am I being motivated by love? Because I think we'll see that those two things do not mix, and they are diametrically opposed. And we have a choice every day to live our lives listening to the voice of love or listening to the voice of fear. I want to take us to the Hebrew Scriptures, the fourth book of the Old Testament in the Torah, Numbers, and chapters 13 and 14, just to set the stage a little bit. God's people, the Israelites, were enslaved by Egypt for hundreds of years, and they cried out to God, and God heard the zedekah, the cry of the oppressed, and he responds to rescue them from slavery. And he sets them out in the dark of the night through the Passover to be freed from Pharaoh, and now they're out in the wilderness, and God promises them he's going to give them their own promised land, their own place where they will set up their nation and have prosperity and life and community. And where we find them in Numbers 13 is that they are right on the cusp of reaching the promised land that God had given to them. And so God calls Moses in and goes like, hey, we're almost there. I got some instructions for you before we head into the promised land. And we're told this. In Numbers 13, chapter 13, verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. Now, this is the best news because they had been wandering through the wilderness with a mobile reality of being a mobile people. And this is saying, okay, finally, God is going to give us our homeland that he had promised. And he says, I want you to send some guys to go look at this land that God has promised for you, and it is going to change everything. He's giving you a homeland from his hands. And so God says, get a leader from each of the tribes. So there are 12 tribes of Israel. Get one representative to go be a spy or a scout to go check out this land because it's just right over there, and take some time and just report back to us. And so we're told for 40 days there were 12 spies or scouts that went over and checked out the land. They come back after 40 days, and the report at first is so exciting. We're told this. They came back, these 12 spies or scouts came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly. Imagine a massive crowd, everybody together to hear about this land that God's promised to them. And he says this, and he says they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They come back with reports that there are these massive clusters of grapes, and there are pomegranates and figs. And in the Jewish mind, these massive fruits were luxuries. It was giving them a note of abundance, that this is not a place that's scarce, but this is a place of God's promise and of God's abundance for us. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. This phrase, this is a land that flows with milk and honey, again, doesn't say that this is like scrapped together and we'll make it. It is communicating abundance, that there is not scarcity here, but there's enough for everyone, and it's going to be luxurious, and it's going to be more than we could ever imagine. God has made his promise to us, and he has kept his promise to us. This land is awesome. In our language today, like there's some growth opportunity here, or like in our churchy language, we'd be like, this is a God thing. Look at the way he's setting us up. But it's not the end of the report from the scouts. After they show the fruit and they talk about how awesome it is, they've got some bad news. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. In other words, we are not alone. We can't go there. You see, like there are people already there, and you start to see the fear seep into the language, and they are powerful. In other words, they're more powerful than we are. They've got military might and force, and their cities are fortified. We could never move into their cities, and they're very large. They are far more evolved than we are as a society. We could never overtake them. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Now, this is interesting, and I spent way too much time reading about this. The idea of Anak is nowhere else. It's not found earlier in the scriptures. This is basically a Jewish legend. This is like ghost stories, if you will, of something that would bring nightmares to young Jewish kids at this time. And the descendants of Anak was supposed to be a very large giant of a person, almost like the boogeyman or the indomitable snowman, or what's it called? Yeah, the Yeti, right? Yeah. That kind of a thing that's going on. It's like supposed to be really scary, something you would freak people out with. Things like, these people are so big, the descendants of Anak are there. These monsters have overtaken the land. They continue on and they continue to give the negative side of this report. We see a couple of verses later. They spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. It's like King Kong's Skull Island. You're not even going to survive the land. Hear like the exaggeration dripping off of their words. They say, all the people we saw there are of great size. Those babies are huge. Like, it's this idea that we are in trouble because they are so much bigger than we are. And then they even bring in some like spiritual religious language to tint the whole situation with more fear. And he says, we saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim, it's this strange passage in Genesis chapter 6. It's the only time they're mentioned in all the scripture. It's this idea that there were these heavenly beings and spiritual beings that had children with humans and created this whole other race of people. But we never heard about them again throughout all the scriptures. But we see that it's mixed in with the legend of Anak and how big and strong they are. We see the fear dripping off of the pages everywhere you get. And even bringing in the language of the Nephilim, man, when fear gets spiritualized, it gets heavier, doesn't it? It gets scarier, doesn't it? And this is exactly what some of these spies do. It gets down to even how the Israelites see themselves. They continue the negative report and say this: we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. They start to distort their identity of who they are because of the fear that they're experiencing. Like, we were like nothing. We were like an insect in our own eyes, and we were like an insect to them. Don't miss this. Fear distorts their identity as God's children. They feel small and powerless. They forget that God had just given them a great victory over Egypt and escaping Egypt. It distorts what's true about them. And isn't it true that fear does the same thing to us today? When all we can see is fear in front of our eyes, man, it maximizes what could go wrong and minimizes what could go right. I have friends that have this struggle sometimes. I say that they don't live with post-traumatic stress, they live with pre-traumatic stress. Like the worst thing that could happen to them, not only could happen, but it's already happened and it's already negatively affecting their lives, because they see themselves in this fight or flight moment because of their fear, even though nothing's actually happened yet. And things get really scary because there becomes a mob mentality. Next, we see a couple of verses later, we see this. That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, complaining about their leaders. And the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to just go back to Egypt? You see how quickly they forget their story, how quickly they forget God's provision and God's rescue. I mean, they're thinking like, even though we were in chains back then, it wasn't all that bad, was it? Or even though we didn't know where our next meal was coming from in the wilderness, and we had to trust God every moment of every day, like it wasn't all that bad. Maybe we can just go back there. You see how they interpret the reality in front of them in the worst possible interpretation, that the Lord is bringing us to this land and we're all going to die by the sword and our women and our children are going to be taken as plunder. Like, even though none of that has happened yet, they're already living with the effects of it. And they think, wouldn't it just be better for us to go back into Egypt, to go back into slavery? They're just thinking back, and their memory is distorted. And doesn't fear do that same thing to us today? Where we stay in a job that we hate, we stay in a toxic relationship that's abusive because we don't know what else is out there for us and we don't think we could possibly deserve better or have better. We let fear distort our identity, distort our memory, distort what's truly happening in the story that we are a part of. And you guys, there's great consequences of the fear-mongering, of the fake news and the conspiracy theories that are being spread across the camp of Israel. Great consequence. Because God says, I forgive you, but there's going to be consequences. You're not going to be able to go into the promised land. It's going to take you 40 more years. You're going to go the roundabout way because you won't go through. You're going to go the roundabout way. It's going to take you 40 years. And most of you are not going to experience this land that I have given to you. Fear cost them so much. But what's powerful about the story to me is not only the cautionary tale, but it's that there were a couple spies that didn't live by the narrative of fear. We're told that there's a guy by the name of Caleb and a guy by the name of Joshua, who they were two spies that went on this scouting mission as well, but they came back with a completely different story than the mob mentality. And they were trusting a completely different voice than the voice of fear. We see Caleb enter into the story after the first report, and Caleb's telling something completely different. He says this: Caleb silenced the people before Moses. Like there's a whole mob there, and he tells everybody, stop. We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. There's a confidence there. God said he was giving it to us. Why don't you trust that the God who rescued us out of Egypt is going to come through on his promise? We see in another passage that Joshua and Caleb are again standing up against the mob mentality, giving an unpopular message that they can trust God in this situation. We see this, Joshua and Caleb. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, you guys. Remember the story. Remember how God has invited us into this relationship and rescued us. Don't rebel against him. And do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. That idea of the land devouring them, Joshua and Caleb flip it on its head. It's like, no, we're going to devour anybody who's in our way because God is with us. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. He says, But there is a different way to run this story. The land is good, you guys, and God is giving it to us. So let's not let fear drive us. Let's trust God, even though there will be challenges. Let's trust him because he's with us, he is for us, and he has proven that he loves us. I mean, notice here, the voice of fear is not guiding Joshua and Caleb. The voice of love is winning over, and it's shouting down the voice of fear. You notice how in Joshua and Caleb's language, it's a love for God and a love for this God who has given them this new opportunity that is coming through, like a faith-filled trust because of what God has done. He has been rescuer before. He will again. He is with us, so do not be afraid. So they're letting the love of God drive their decision-making in this, but also a love for other people drive their decision-making as well. You can sort of hear the pleading in this language of being like, don't pass your future because of this fear. This land is exceedingly good. Don't be afraid. Push through because God is with us, guys. Let's not throw away our inheritance and what God has promised for us over irrational fear. Don't do it. It's what they're pleading with the people. And let's go from Joshua and Caleb's story for just a moment. I want to come back to our story, and we think about our fork in the road, decisions that we need to make that are tough, that are uncomfortable. I want to ask you this question. Are you letting the voice of fear or the voice of love drive your decisions? Are you only considering what you can lose? Or are you even considering what God might have for you? Are you considering God's faithfulness in your past? Or are you only thinking about a scary future that is in front of you? Are you inviting the God of the universe into your decisions and listening to that voice of love? Or are you just letting fear and anxiety and what could go wrong drive your decisions? I want you to sit with that for a moment because this is such a huge issue in our cultural moment and in my life and in my heart and perhaps in your life, in your heart as well. But Joshua and Caleb, they listened to the voice of love instead of the voice of fear, and it changes everything. We see that Caleb is actually commended for the way he stood up against fear and the crowd, and we're told this in the narrative. Because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Like, Caleb's not going to miss out because he listened to the voice of love, and you listen to the voice of fear, and you're going to miss out. It's going to be less than what God wanted for you. I think it's interesting language here that the author of Numbers gives us, that Caleb has a different spirit. He's got a different kind of way that he walks, a different way that he's approaching life. He's just got a different spirit. We move into the world of the New Testament, and we see this same kind of language shine through as Paul is writing to his protege, one of his ministers in training, a guy by the name of Timothy. And he's writing to this young guy, trying to encourage him to choose love over fear. And I think he's speaking to us in our realities today as well. Paul says this in 1 Timothy, or 2 Timothy. He said, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." I think this is what the author of Numbers is picking up on, as Caleb didn't let fear drive him. The Greek word for fear here is timidity. It's sort of being wish-washy and standing back and being passive. And Paul is saying, like, God doesn't give you that spirit. In other words, in God's economy, he doesn't deal out fear. He doesn't want you to work through fear. He gives you a different reality, a different spirit, not of timidity, but of action and of trust and active partnership with him. Not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. We just talked about this a lot last month in our relationship series, The Art of Us, but love is not an emotion. It's not a wishy-washy, like butterfly and rainbows kind of thing. Love is action-oriented. Love is serving someone else and self-sacrificial love. Like, that is not timid. That is not fearful. That is moving into a mess to bring hope. And Paul is telling his protege, I think he's speaking to us in our modern moments where fear is driving us so much. He goes, hey, God doesn't give you a spirit of fear. God gives you a spirit of love and of power and of self-control. And I want to ask us a question in this. If your heavenly Father doesn't deal out fear and he doesn't want you to live in fear, but he gives you a different reality, if God doesn't deal in fear, Who's given you a spirit of fear? If this is not what your Heavenly Father, what your Creator, what your Savior does for you, then who has given it to you? I think of Dana Carvey in 90s SNL. Was it Satan? And we'd like to throw it there easily because it's no responsibility that we bear. Maybe it's the evil one, maybe. But maybe it's us that we pick up. Maybe it's our self-interest, our self-preservation, our ego. I don't know. Maybe a mixture of all those things. But I want us to be reminded that God, in his economy, he doesn't deal in fear. He doesn't want you to be motivated by fear. He doesn't want to give you that spirit. He gives you a different spirit, a better spirit of power, love, and of self-control. And if God doesn't give you a spirit of fear, then we need to investigate where it's coming from. And we need to shout it down and push it away and get it out of the driver's seat. One of Jesus' closest disciples, the disciple that Jesus loved, John, he writes in one of his letters called 1 John, often about love and how gritty it is. And he writes in chapter 4 something so powerful having to do with the spirit of fear and a spirit of love. He picks up this as well, and he says this is how love is made complete among us. In other words, this is how we mature to be the people that God has created us to be. This is how we grow in our faith. That's the language of love being made complete among us. So that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. When Jesus returns, we'll have confidence in this world. We are like Jesus. We've been transformed to look more like Jesus, to be mature. And then he gets into this fear language. He says, there's no fear in love. But perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. There's so much powerful theology that's so practical and challenging in our lives right here. John says that there's no fear in love, that fear and love are like oil and water. They do not mix. And we have to choose, are we going to be motivated by fear or by love? And if we're going to be maturing, we're going to be made perfect in love. He continues and says, but perfect love drives out fear. The love of God, the presence of God, the voice of God, it drives out fear from our life. And I have to ask the question, if perfect love drives out fear, is the opposite true as well? Does fear in our lives, does it drive out perfect love? I think it does. I think when fear gets in the driver's seat of my life, I move farther away from the voice of love and the almighty love of God. And I want my life not to be motivated by fear, but motivated by love. And I want my decisions to not be motivated by what I might lose, but by love. I want to hear the voice of love and quiet down and shush the voice of fear. I want this in my life. I want this for you. I want this for my kids. I want them to look at the world not through a lens of fear and what could go wrong, but trusting the abundance and the grace and the mercy and the provision of God. I want that for them. Back in February, Megan and I, we picked up the boys from preschool and from first grade in the middle of the school day, and we drove to the airport without telling them anything, and we got on a plane and we went to Disney World with them for 2 very fun, very expensive days. And I took a big gamble our very first day. We had a full day at the Magic Kingdom. I took a big dad gamble that almost backfired on me when it comes to this whole fear conversation. My kids, they've never been to a carnival, they've never been to a fair, they've never been on a roller coaster, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna go to the biggest, baddest roller coaster in Magic Kingdom, and the one that they're tall enough to ride. And I'm gonna look at them and be like, if you can do this, you can do anything. And it was gonna be this cool dad moment where you can trust me, buddy. You're gonna make it. You're not gonna fall out of that roller coaster. Everything's gonna be great. And so we go to the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, the very first ride that we do. And we have to wait about 20 minutes in line. And everything was good. And I'm giving them this pep talk until you get to the part of the line where you can see the train go down this hill and how fast it's going. And Jack looked at me and goes, I don't want to do that. Kind of thing. I'm like, oh no, you can do it. But I'm giving all this pep talk. But the whole time I'm looking at Megan and I'm thinking, okay, what if this really backfires and we spent all this money and we're down here and the very first thing we do, they're like, I'm never going on another ride ever again. I'm like, what have I wrought is what I'm thinking, right? But we finally get up there and I'm giving them this pep talk. You can trust me. This is going to be awesome. You're going to be safe and you're going to have so much fun. And we go on the ride. And here's a picture of us on the ride. We're looking pretty happy when you look, but look closely here. Go to the other picture here. Yes. Incredible. So much fear. But you know what happened? You know what happened? They got off the ride and first thing Jack says is, can we do that again? And to me, that was a little win inside of them trusting their dad, trusting me that I have their best interest in mind. Take that picture off the screen, poor kids. That they could trust me. And to move towards love, don't move towards fear, move towards the relationship that I say it's gonna be okay, and it's gonna be okay. This is what your Heavenly Father wants for you, is to listen to his voice and to kick fear to the curb, because we miss so much when we let fear drive us. So a couple practical challenges for us, you guys. I want us to think about what are ways that we can kick fear to the curb and listen more to the voice of love in our decision making. First one is this. I want to challenge you to name the fear underneath the decision that you have in front of you. Just to name it, to slow down and stop just being in your head, freaking out about what's going on, but ask yourself the question, what am I actually afraid of here? What's the thing underneath of the fear? Get specific. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe you're saying, I'm afraid I'll fail. I'm afraid I won't have enough, that I'm not enough, that I'm going to set myself back. I'm afraid I'm going to lose control and I can't white knuckle the situation. Find a way to say it out loud, because something happens when we unmask our fear and we look at what's really underneath of it. Fear loses some of its power when it's named. So slow down and name what's actually going on. The fear underneath this decision is losing some of my ego and my reputation, or some money, or what I thought my future was going to be. Name the thing underneath the fear, and then ask, is this fear protecting wisdom? Is this wise? Is this the way of the wise? Or is it just protecting my comfort? Is it protecting myself? Is this more about self-preservation, or is it about following the voice of love? Name the fear, because it will. When you unmask the thing underneath the thing and you name it, what's underneath the decision, man, it loses some of its power. It might sound weird and mystical, but this is so true. Say it out loud, write it down, and you'll start to realize that the monsters underneath the bed are not even really there, and they're definitely not as scary as you thought they were. So first, name the fear under your decision. Unmask what's really going on. The second one is this. Let community help you discern. Get out of your own head. Talk to your spouse, but talk to trusted friends. Talk to your partner. Talk to people that you know and love. Humble yourself enough to be like, hey, I'm facing this thing and I'm scared to death about it, and I don't know exactly where to go. Should I be afraid of this? Have you ever experienced this? Humble yourself to get out of your head with a tough decision. Ask for feedback. Ask for different perspectives. Ask people that are older and more wise than you if they've been down this road. And this is another challenge for us. You need to realize, if I said those things, you're like, I don't have a friend that I can do that with, that I would trust to give me a faith-filled, loving story, then I want you to consider finding some people that are wanting to follow Jesus, and they're going to run in the same direction that you are, to be your friends, because your friends will determine your future. If you hang out with cynical and skeptical and fearful people, you will become more and more skeptical, cynical, and fearful. If you grew up in a home where your mom and dad were skeptical, fearful, and cynical, and you only talk to mom and dad about things, guess what story you're going to write with your life? It's going to be driven by fear. When you hang out with faith-filled people that see following Jesus not as just a list of doctrines that they check mark next to, but people that see following Jesus as an adventure to partner with him, man, everything changes. So let community help you discern. Get out of your own head and get faith-filled, adventurous people that trust the voice of love in their life to help you make decisions. It's not all on you. You can't do it alone. And that's not an indictment on your strength. It's just a reality check that we need each other. And then the last question I want you to ask, and this is specifically a question I want you to ask. What would I choose if I really believed the gospel? When you're in a fork in the road moment and something's scary and you don't know what to do and you're afraid you're letting fear get into the driver's seat, ask, what would I choose if I really believed Christianity? What would I choose if I really believed Jesus? What would I choose if I really believed the good news of Jesus? I've heard it said before that the greatest distance in our lives is between our head and our heart. Or many of us, we believe something cerebrally in our brain, but we don't feel it and trust it in our gut. What would you choose if you really believed the gospel? Not what would I choose if I knew everything was going to work out? Like, that's not faith, that's certainty. And again, God in his economy does not deal in certainty, but he wants us to have faith. Instead of asking, what would I do if I knew everything would work out? Instead, ask, what would I do if I trusted that God was already with me and he'll be with me even if it's hard? And even if the worst thing happens, I still have God and I'm held by God. I mean, seriously, ask yourself this. Are you making decisions in your life like you actually believe that God is with you? Are you making decisions in your life where you believe that God is for you and he loves you and has plans for you and wants to partner with you in your life? Are you making decisions that way? Oftentimes, we let those thoughts stay in our church bubble and then we go into our Monday through Friday life and they never intersect. And that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. Make decisions like you really believe this stuff and your life is going to be more beautiful than you could possibly imagine. You guys, throughout the series, we've talked about the way of the wise, how it's upside down, how it's counterintuitive, how it's not easy and it's not popular, but it's where life really is found. I want to bring us back to the 3 questions that we've asked, that I want you to ask the next time you have a tough decision in front of you. Week 1, we said, will this decision give me what I truly want or just what I want right now? This is a question of instant gratification. Like, is this decision going to lead me to like the wise thing in light of my past, my present, and my future hopes and dreams? Or is it just give me what I want right now? Ask this question and have a wider perspective. The question of week 2, does this choice only benefit me or does it consider others too? This is about self-gratification. That our decision-making and our life should not just be about us and what we can get from things, but we've got to consider the weight of our decisions on other people. And we know the wreckage it causes when we only consider ourselves, and we should slow our roll and ask, does this consider others too? Does this make their life lighter or heavier? And then today, our question, am I making this decision out of fear or am I motivated by love? And underneath this question, I think, is self-preservation, where we think we've got to take care of ourselves so that we get the life that we want. And what a tragedy it is when we put that weight on our shoulders that we were never created to bear. But can we trust the voice of love? Will we trust the voice of love and quiet down our fears? Because this is true, you guys. You write the story of your life one decision at a time. You don't write the story of your life by your intentions, by your thoughts. You write the story of your life one decision at a time. So let's begin to choose the way of the wise. That's not about now, but it's about later. It's not about self, but it's about others. It's not about fear and what we could lose, but it's about trusting the voice of love who's holding us in his hands.